Hi, Tami.
Hi.
We have begun.
Oh, we have? Cool.
Yeah, we've started. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
You are welcome, Tami. I do need to slide in my obligatory, and it won't be very smooth this time because I don't know why, just for whatever reason. Maybe that's how we'll start. But Tami Weaver, you are on deck.
Thank you, Chris Herman. It's my pleasure to be here.
Welcome. Good. So I thought I learned something about you recently that I did not realize. For some reason, I did not realize that you have Italian heritage.
Yes, even though I didn't get to grow up with it.
Right.
It's basically my birth father was an Italian.
Okay.
But I'm adopted. So I didn't get to grow up in that specific culture.
Okay. That clarifies it for me a little bit more because I don't want to say surprised, but when you said that, I was like, oh, I didn't know that, nor did I sense that because you have a very Midwestern sensibility in a lot of ways. So this Italian thing didn't really come through to me in previous conversation. Now that I know, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, probably a little bit more in my personality or my makeup.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. So for today, in light of that, I wanted to get a bottle of Italian wine. So this morning I went to Total Wine in Aventura. In a Total Wine, they have like a section up front where they have, like their staff picks and stuff like that. All different whites, reds, champagne. It's not a huge section. And then they have something for every nation. So I was looking for Italian wine and I was reading the reviews and I saw that this had a nice review and I said, oh, let me see what that is. And then I saw that the label was almost your full name.
Almost.
Tam. I don't know anything about this wine other than it is 60% Cabernet Sauvignon and 40% Cabernet Franc. There you have it. So we have a red Italian wine with almost your full name on it. So I wanted to start off by saying cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And here's to our, as Donna would say, here's to our podcasting.
Here it goes.
Here we go.
It's actually quite nice.
All right, good. I'm glad you like it. We'll see how it shapes out to whatever the duration of our conversation is. Okay, so Tami Weaver, you are our Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer here at the agency. You've been here 7.5 years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically full time.
Yes. 7.5 years, and I consider you my right hand in everything that we do around here. We've been able to communicate well, make good decisions for the business, share a lot of information about the business. You've been an integral part of our success here, and you have worn a large number of hats, right? Mm-hmm. For CFO, you're CFO, you're HR, you're IT, you are, and I don't think that you would like this description, but kind of house mom to some degree, a little bit. I don't think that that's a fair description, but there is a component of motherly love that comes from you for all of us and helping to take care of the place. But I would place your overall hard work and work ethic and experience in a number of areas as a high level of importance to me. So I want to say thank you for all those years of great work. I've really enjoyed it and look forward to maximizing as many more as we possibly can. Right, yeah. I'm going to keep trying to keep you around as long as I can.
Well, as long as the Social Security age continues to get pushed back, you might just get your wish.
That's funny. Well, then let's hope that happens. So here we got some nice red Italian wine and plenty of time to sit and talk. So I do, as I always do with these conversations, I have a number of questions. But I'd like to start off with, how does a self-described black sheep from a Midwestern family who loves to sing and perform and be the center of attention end up in the field of accounting? How did that happen?
Well, obviously, it started probably in the early years of high school and then college. In high school, I grew up in a very small town in Oklahoma, and we weren't really given opportunities to, like we weren't given career testing or anything like that to see, other areas that we would qualify for. So my choices were I was going to get married, or I could be a nurse, a teacher, a secretary, or whatever. So I went to school, and I started out as a secretary. But very early in my career, I realized that for one thing, I felt too intelligent to stay in that field.
Right.
And then I had met some of the girls that had engineering degrees, and here they were making a lot of money compared to me as a secretary. And I just knew that if I wanted, to progress in my career and my future, I needed to go back to school. So that's what I did. I went back to school. And at that point, the simplest thing to do was just to go into accounting. And I had been around numbers and everything all my life because my mother worked in the bank.
Okay.
And then my father is the dean of the business department at the college that I first attended. So I was around numbers all my life, and it does come very, very easy for me. So I guess bottom line was it wound up just being the career that came to me.
Okay.
And from that point forward, it just continued to expand, because once I started working in accounting, then I wanted to grow, further and further into that. And then, as you know, now, many years later, I feel like I can do accounting forwards and backwards. So the way to keep myself interested was to expand my skills, which is what has moved me into HR. Now, on the true side of it, had my parents, or I even, realized my true passion for entertaining and or just letting my personality shine, I'm sure my road would have been a lot different.
So let's back up to that time, I guess, to that potential crossroad, if you will. So you grew up, what was the town that you grew up in Oklahoma?
It's called Fairland.
Fairland. Population?
Maybe 1,000.
Really?
Yeah. Back then.
Okay.
Now it's probably much smaller, but...
Oh, even smaller now. So what's it like growing up, in the heartland like that, in a very small Midwestern town? Dad's the dean of the business college, mom works at the bank. Very, I would imagine, small and close-knit community.
Very. And then to top it all off, my grandfather owned the hardware store in town. So everybody knew who the Weavers were.
Okay.
So I grew up, yes, very well known within town. And being in a smaller school like that, with my personality anyway, I did a little bit of everything. I was in band, I was in choir, I was a cheerleader, I was a drum majorette. I got to do like a little bit of everything just because I was from a smaller environment.
Right, so less competition for the slots in all of these different
Exactly.
right?
There was still some competition, but yes, a lot less.
I think a lot of people would have a vision in their mind of small town Midwestern USA, and the sort of the notion that everybody really knows each other. You're talking about a safe community where people are helping out and lending a helping hand, and all the businesses are local businesses that everybody supports and participates in. Is that an accurate statement? And is it as idyllic as the Norman Rockwell paintings would portray?
I would say we started out that way until Walmart came.
Right.
Which is ironic, but there again, growing up in the northeast corner, Walmart was in Bentonville, which is just right across the state line, not too far. So my particular part of the country experienced Walmart a lot sooner than some other, as it continued to spread globally. But gradually what happened was the downtowns and some of the mom and pop shops did start to disappear right away. But yes, we had a lot of those, a lot of family-owned businesses and a lot of community support, and not just from our local town, but all the little towns around there. So,
we touched on it because a few of us were out to dinner last night, and we touched on this a little bit. But that whole, the experience of the Walmarts and the big box retailers moving into, what I referenced last night was a lot of these Rust Belt, towns, and it's the same thing through the Midwest. Was it difficult to watch, as the core center of your town starts to, disintegrate as a result of not being able to compete with a Walmart?
Well, to be quite honest, most of that happened as I was more like in high school.
Okay.
So once I got into the college and different things like that, it didn't really affect me because in my mind, I had already left home, kind of. You know what I mean? So I think it hits me more now when I get to go home and visit my family and I just see how, what used to be is no longer,
I find that difficult. I mentioned last night, I find that difficult to see around our country. This, you've got so many, and it's all throughout our country, what used to be very beautiful, classic American towns, that there was that sense of community, that sense of local business and supporting and being able to have a successful community. And you go through so many of them, and those areas are just decimated. And all those shops downtown are empty or look like they're hanging on by a thread, and it's a very unfortunate byproduct of some of the, I guess, the economic growth in our country and how it's gone into these larger retailers, which is there's no turning back at this point in time.
Definitely not. Like I said, I think it's more depressing today. Like when I do get to go home and I just have the memories of when I used to be able to go next door and get my little 5-cent root beer float, at the pharmacy when they still had the little ice cream parlors
like
attached and everything.
Right?
Yeah. But the other thing is that it seemed to bring a lot of poverty to some of those areas, because the big industries, some of them take over, and if you're lucky enough to work in those industries, then great. But then there's also been a lot of industries that were driven out, so I find that a lot of, when I go back home now, I just sense a lot of poverty in those rural areas, and it's totally different than us here in the city.
Right.
It's definitely two different worlds.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel, growing up, and I take it when you first went to college, did you go to college in the town did you stay local for that?
Yes, I did for the first 2 years. And then right away, I got a job at Phillips Petroleum.
Okay.
Because that's kind of what a lot of us did. We went to junior college. They would have a career day, and Phillips Petroleum was a big company.
Okay.
They're in Oklahoma, so they went to all the schools and they recruited people. And so it was very easy, kind of to get a job. Okay. So at that point, I was still young and kind of let me make some money. I'm going to get married someday, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But there again, it didn't take me very long once I started to realize that, no, I was not going to stay in that field very long at all.
And so was there a sense, you mentioned earlier that there was sort of this feeling like you had already left. Was there, even though the town you grew up in had a very close-knit feel, was there also a limiting feel to it, sort of like, I got to get out of here and get on to bigger things in my life?
Yeah, I think I was probably just following the normal course of going to school, getting my degree.
Right.
But even in the small town, for example, when there was a beauty pageant, I was in the beauty pageants. When there was a competition in the neighboring towns, I would compete. So I was always kind of involved in doing a lot of other things that were not available in my specific town.
Okay.
So I guess in that regard, I've just always had this free spirit or this adventuresome spirit. And then I also got to work at Shangri-La, which is our equivalent of a 5-star resort on Grand Lake. That has the golf courses and in the summer, the boating and everything like that. I worked there during one of my summers, And I also got to experience people that were from the city, and I got to experience people that had money, a more affluent lifestyle.
Okay.
And so all these things just kind of really resonated with me and just started to kind of be like, if I want something in my future, it's not going to happen here. So I did kind of realize that as I started to meet more and more people and learned about other places besides where I had grown up.
And in witnessing that and experiencing that and sensing for yourself that, okay, let's say there's a bigger world out there, there's more opportunity, there's perhaps a different or better lifestyle available to me. At that age, what are the decisions that you make to move yourself in that direction?
Well, I guess that decision was when I decided to go back to school, because I knew that schooling was going to be my way to progress up the ladder. Of course, it's a big corporation, so like your goal is to go from, like, say, a G1 to a G2. After you get to your degree, you go from like an E5 to E6.
Are those different levels of accounting positions? Is that what that
different levels throughout the entire organization?
Okay.
But yeah, so of course that's the goal, is that you always want to get promoted to the next level. So which is what I kept doing as I went to night school. But then I got very frustrated because after I graduated, I didn't get to move automatically into my new position. And so there again, now we're talking into my career. I kind of got frustrated, and about that same time, the oil company was being potentially bought out by T. Boone Pickens, I believe his name.
Yes.
And that was a big thing back then, where there were a lot of oil company takeovers. And they went through an attrition process, and they offered people severance packages. And I was young. I thought, let me do that. So that's what I did.
So you took the severance package.
I took the package. And then by this point, though, I had already been in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
So in Denver, a lot more doors started to open, after I transferred from Bartlesville to Denver.
So, and I know you have very fond memories of your time in Colorado and Denver, because we talk about it, regularly. How was that transition from Oklahoma to Denver at that time? Like, what, as a young woman, you're starting your career, it had to be exciting. And I'm curious to, what was life like there?
It was fun. Moved in, I had a roommate with the girl that I had been roommates with in Oklahoma, because we both took the job. We were in the DTC area,
right?
If you remember where that's at.
Denver Tech Center.
Yes, the Denver Tech Center on the south side. And I was working in accounting there. And I think the fun thing there was I was in the big city. So I was always getting to explore different areas. But there again, I was still going to school.
Right.
And I was still, progressing my career that way. But Denver is where I truly developed my lifelong friendships. Through school, through work, through different apartments that I lived in and different things like that. But the biggest thing about Denver was I got introduced to people from so many different cultures and lifestyles. And for me, that was very exciting.
That just put a sparkle in your eye just thinking about it. I did. I can see it, like you just lit up, thinking about that. So that obviously was like, an awakening experience for you, meeting people from different parts of the world and different cultures and different experiences like that. That had to be, obviously, it was exciting.
It was. And then, of course, I love the mountains.
Right.
So from day one, it was like head up to the mountains. Spent a lot of time up there.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful part of the country. I'm curious, as you're, I see with you a number of things, but there's this career trajectory and growth through growing up, education, working your way through different levels of your career, and also knowing you to be a performer and singer and somebody who really loves the musical arts, if you will. Was that something that was always a part of your life? And did these two paths run parallel during that time of your life?
Not during that time of my life. Of course, the singing and all that really just started within my household.
Right.
Because apparently, even as a little kid, I got in front of everybody and sang the Star Spangled Banner at my uncle's basketball games.
Uh-huh.
So somewhere along the way, it started pretty early. But my father was also the music director at the church that we attended all these years. So I was in the choir at school, and I was in choir at church. Now, when I was in Denver, I really didn't explore that side of my life too much. Mm-hmm. I was too busy with the career and school and just exploring, my new world.
Right.
But always my music ultimately came in and through the church.
It's interesting when you think about, like, if I think about the great rhythm and blues and soul performers of, and even rock and roll performers of the last 50, 60 years, you think of, like, all right, I'm going to throw some names out, like Little Richard, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight. All of these performers have this foundational root of music in the church. And for me, it conjures an image, this real beautiful, using the voice and excitement and energy to honor the Lord, if you will, right? On Sunday or whatever. And I think of like a joyous occasion. Was it like that growing up, being a participant in church choir in the Midwest? Was it more solemn? What was it like?
No. It was definitely not solemn in the sense of like some of your Protestant churches that are a little bit more ritualist, liturgic, I think would be the right word.
Liturgical.
Uh-huh. But I grew up with a lot of Southern gospel. And then as I got older and I got introduced to Black gospel, that definitely is a little bit more of the uplifting, joyous music. But my childhood music mostly was hymnals.
Okay.
In that regards. But it was probably later when you get into the gospels and then some of the stuff you don't realize, but like even as a young lady, I was sneaking over to the Pentecostal church through the outside and listen because they got crazy. They had the tambourines and they were jumping and dancing and that particular sect of the Pentecostal church. And I always thought that looked like so much fun at the time because, the Baptists didn't do that, But anyway, so yeah, I guess I've always enjoyed music in the sense of what it brings to your soul. Like even here, today,
yes.
If I need to be calm or if I need to be uplifted or music is just, it hits your soul in a way that nothing else can.
No, specifically, and I agree, right? But what, like for you, what does that mean? I know that's a tough question to answer, but I'm curious.
Well, like now that I'm getting to sing more regular again, there's just this energy and this vibration that goes through your entire body.
Right.
And it's good for your lungs, and it's good for everything. But yeah, for me, it's just a fulfillment that it's like a flow or like just a warm feeling, and I get that happy feeling.
Right. There's something about, for you singing, and I get that in other areas, but that it's performing, right? And there's something about performing, I find that it gets you very in the moment, right? It's a particular skill that you've developed that you enjoy, and by being able to do it, it puts you in a very right in the moment type of experience where you just let it flow through you. And it's so satisfying. It's freeing in a way, right? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, because like you and I have had a brief discussion before about how like you can perform, but if nobody's watching, you don't get that same feeling as if somebody's eyes are on you.
Right.
And I feel like in this case, it's that connectedness, that brings that extra level of energy. Because, you can perform and you can be doing your thing and, it feels good on an individual level. But for it to be complete, it needs to be enjoyed by someone else. It seems like, or.
Well, there's the shared experience of it,
yes,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not to say that if you are singing by yourself, it's not enjoyable. Of course it's enjoyable. But there is something about performing, even as we put up, you put up a little stage and you've got a few people watching you, and now you feel like you're performing, right? And so
Correct.
It's a combination of like the skill and the actual, also, exposing yourself in a way, right? I mean, you're sharing a very personal part of yourself, at least for because like if I play guitar, if I were to even dare sing in front, I'm still very like it's nervous. I get nervous. I think you less.
Yeah.
I think for you, there's more of that outgoingness.
Well, it also depends on the environment.
Right.
Right now, the singing that I'm getting to do is in a very small, intimate environments.
Right.
And I love that. But I've also been on very large stages. We used to perform at the Arch Center for the Performing Arts several times.
Really? Down in Miami?
Yes. And so I've been on some pretty large stages. Now, those stages make me a lot more nervous.
Do they?
Than this would. On the other hand, I have the kind of personality that I get a lot of energy from other people. Mm-hmm. So my nerves are probably more a matter of like, am I going to do okay, as opposed to like being nervous because there's other people around.
Right.
It's more of an internal nervousness.
Sure, which is natural because if you're going to perform, you want to perform well, right? That's
exactly.
That's sort of the pressure. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to screw up,
Exactly. But being in front of the people, that part doesn't usually make me too nervous.
No, me neither. And if it's two people, and I've never performed anything in front of 2,000 people, but 2 people, 200 people, 200,000 people, I feel like at a certain number, it's almost like the crowd would become so big that it's almost like it's sort of it would be a different experience, right? Like if you were to get on stage in front of a stadium, right? You could in your mind think, oh my God, there's all these people, but then you really can only focus on a few of them at any given time anyway. So I don't know, maybe it's not...
Well, I doubt we're ever going to be lucky enough to sing at a stadium. But
I hope so. I don't want to sing, but I still have some strange desire to be like, I don't know what it would be, but like to be able to get up in front of a really big crowd.
Yeah, we could do halftime
your
entertainment somewhere.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Why
that
not?
would be fun.
Why not? Well, it's really cool because I know, again, you've run these 2 tracks that sort of seem not disparate, but it's for you, this accounting field.
Yes.
This was a career path, right? This was a work path.
Solely.
Maybe not like a passion path for you.
Correct.
But a very meaningful and logical path for you to follow as a young woman growing up in the Midwest at that particular time.
Right.
Which there's a lot to be said about that,
and,
right?
I'm also from the generation where my generation of women were very highly encouraged to become career women.
That's great.
Now, granted, I did grow up, with I shouldn't say small town philosophy, but I did grow up thinking that I was supposed to get married and have babies, and I was going to be a great PTA mom and all that. But as time progressed and it became more and more obvious that marriage wasn't happening right away,
right.
Then it became all about the career and a lot of encouragement in that area. And then, ultimately, before I came to Florida, a person in my life said something about, you're single. What happens if you stay single the rest of your life? How are you going to support yourself? Don't you want to take care of yourself the best way you can? And that's when I went back and got my master's. Mm-hmm. And then from that point on, it was so obvious that the career was where I was at. I was always open to other things. And I did finally get married, but later on, mm-hmm. So... But the music has always just been the passion, right. And, like the hobby.
Yes.
Or the weekends or the nighttime activities versus the career. So yeah.
It's encouraging to hear you talk about how, your entrance into and pathway through the career field was highly supported, right? Because there's certain generations in history where women did not have that same experience, right?
Exactly.
And you were able to, to develop your career and your knowledge and your skill set and your success at a time when you were receiving that encouragement as well too, which is really, I think it's really important. And additionally, it was a little bit of a different time. Like now, I don't know if as many people, just because of the changing landscape of business, it seems to me, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but you have a lot more smaller businesses that people can get into, right? Like for kids getting out of college now, I don't know that the number one goal is I want to go work at the big corporation. Where backtrack, a period of time, even up until about the time when I graduated college, that was the thing. It was like you wanted to go get a job at the big company and work your way up. And the dynamic has changed, but I think there's a lot to be learned and gained from your experience, from the perspective of what it's like to, you get the education, you go into the big company, and then you start working your way through these different levels that I don't know that it exists the same way anymore.
I don't think so either. Even myself, I did that. I started with that. And very quickly, though, I did kind of realize I don't want to get into an equality discussion, but it was kind of very obvious already at that time, even though I had the highest grades as the guys, that I wasn't going to get put into those positions. But what's important to notice between the difference of then and now is, yes, very much so back then, you wanted to work with a corporation because you wanted to get a pension.
Right.
And you knew that most places, if you stayed with them 20 plus years, you were going to walk away with a large pension. And then, let's just say maybe 7 years into my career, I had an experience where an uncle of mine had done that. And at the very last minute, they yanked all of that out from under him. And so that was when there became this time when it was very nerve-wracking for people, because those pensions, the corporations weren't keeping their word, or they were, whatever happened. But there was a time when those corporations just weren't giving out those pensions anymore. So those of us like myself that were still young enough were like, no, we got to move elsewhere.
Right.
Because I'm not going to work for this company for 25 years and then have them, pull the rug out from underneath me. And so I saw that happen to a few of my relatives. And so from that point forward, that wasn't going to be my goal.
Boy, talk about leaving a bad taste in your mouth, and that happened a lot, people who dedicated their entire working years and profession to a particular company, for what they were able to earn for themselves and their family in the immediate, and then also with the promise of, okay, I'm going to be taken care of to some degree in my retirement, and then just have that, gone.
Yeah, that was kind of a big eye-opener. It was really, it was sad, to see my uncle and their family go through that. A few other people, acquaintances, but yeah, so that it did change, the landscape changed totally, because that's what they used to offer. And when you start looking at what benefits, early on I was taught that your job or your career is more than just what your paycheck is. So when you start looking at benefits and things for the future, it became obvious that wasn't going to be the place, to stay.
Yeah. So you moved on.
I moved on. I did.
Now, how did you end up from Denver to Florida?
Love affair.
Ah.
Yeah. I met somebody in Denver, and one thing led to another, and we developed a relationship, and we were together for quite a few years. He was an international attorney, and so he was transferred to Miami, and I had just finished graduate school.
Okay.
So I was encouraged to move down with him, which I did, and then it didn't quite make it. The relationship didn't quite make it, but I was here, and I had bought a house already, so I felt like I needed to stay here. So what
was the transition like? Colorado. I'm curious to get your perspective on the Colorado to South Florida transition.
Weather,
yeah,
totally different. Went from needing cold weather clothes, to warm weather. Then you've got bug spray versus
Right.
There was a lot of differences, mainly because of the weather, and also because the mountains versus the ocean.
Right.
In Colorado, I was a little bit younger, so I was extremely active in outdoor sports.
Mm-hmm.
I came to Florida, and outdoors was not my place originally.
Right.
It
takes getting used to when you
It
first come
does.
here, right? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe it's hot and sunny every single day.
Yeah, well, and you go from like skiing
Right.
to like maybe sunbathing, and it's two different things.
Yes.
So that was the biggest difference, just extracurricular activities.
Right.
Instead of going to the mountains, you go to the beach, go to the Everglades, or whatever the case may be.
But you found a way to find a life for yourself down
Oh,
here.
yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And maintaining music to some degree through that period of time as well? Or not so much because it was still more career time?
No, I pretty much got back into music I moved here in 1992.
Okay.
And, but I guess it was probably 1996 when I got back into music again.
Gotcha.
And that was when I got back into church.
Uh-huh.
And somebody said, oh, as much as you love to sing, you need to go check out this church downtown, especially the piano player. So one thing led to another, and I went there. And now that piano player is my husband. So being that, once again, now I married a music man.
Yes.
So music has been my life completely since 1996.
Interesting that it came full circle to you. Not only did you marry a music man, you married a music man who is a music man in the church.
Exactly.
Right?
I guess, every little girl, to some extent, wants to marry their dad.
Well,
And in that regard, I guess that's what I did.
You kind of did,
Kinda
right?
did, yeah.
Well, you grow up with that impression. That's, as a girl or a young woman, your first impression of a man is your father,
Exactly.
right? And what do you learn from that person, and what do you seek in somebody else that might be just like them?
Ironically, though, many years of my dating life was rebellious, making sure I didn't date anybody like my dad.
Right.
I wanted to kind of like step away from all that. But like you said, full circle, came back to a place that was comfortable, that was good,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What, from looking back on I have two questions, but the first one is this. Looking back on your career trajectory, right, as somebody who has been successful in business, in accounting, in HR, and really forging your own path through so much of that, if you were to give advice to young women entering the work world now, what would you want to share with them that maybe you think they're not hearing enough of?
There's a big struggle these days for equality,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like ultimately it's hone your skills, be who you are, hold fast to who you are. Don't listen to the world and, the naysayers.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's all been about knowledge and skill and never stop learning. I feel like that's really the thing that a lot of women, they think that they just stop at a certain point. And our young ladies today, now granted it's different for them coming out today because they have different issues than what I would have dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
But with any of them, I would just say always be true to yourself. Don't stop growing. Be the best that you can be, because that's always going to be the best that you can be, right? Regardless, and whatever your career is. And actually, here's what I would really say to anybody that might have experienced a little bit that I did. Seek a job where you have passion and you don't dread getting up every morning to go to work.
Right.
You've got to you're spending so many hours of your day and your life in your career, in your job, do something you love. For sure.
Yeah. That's incredible advice. And I think anybody would benefit from hearing that, because it's true, right? My mom gave me that book years ago, Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. I think there's another phrase. It's like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It doesn't mean you won't have hard days, right? But you'll certainly,
But it's a lot easier to come in and do a job that you love,
yeah,
than something that you're going to dread.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm curious, it's a shift, but having, grown up around the church and, having had the church be such a large part of your life growing up, and again, it's been, a large part of your life over your adult years as well, to the level that you're comfortable, what does spirituality and or faith mean to you, having, spent a large part of your life around the church and men in your life being a part of the church?
Okay, I grew up in church. I grew up very doctrinized because I grew up Southern Baptist. But as I started to meet people from other parts of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and in addition, when I was seeking my bachelor's degree, the college that we went to was Wesleyan College,
Okay.
which is a form of the Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was the college that was in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and when you went to school through Phillips and they paid for it, that was the college that we went to.
Okay.
Okay, being that it was a religious school, we had spiritual classes or religion. But what I liked back then was we got introduced to different religions and different cultural beliefs, spiritual beliefs. And there I was starting to meet people from other parts of the world, other cultures. So my Southern Baptist kind of went a little bit more to the side as I explored more of other cultures and other belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that ultimately that led to more of a spirituality. After all these years, I believe that it's more a relationship between you and your higher power,
Mm-hmm.
whether you call it God, whether you call it the Lord, whether it be Buddha, Allah, any of those names that we give to God or to the person that we worship. I feel that it's more about your internal relationship. And then as I became more accustomed to getting to meet people that were Muslims, and then, like, for example, coming to Florida and getting to meet people from the Jewish faith,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that the one thing that we all have in common is that there's a seeking within us that looks outward for a relationship. So I feel that I moved long away from my roots
Mm-hmm.
of growing up, in a Protestant household environment. And even to this day, for me, I always say I'm spiritual. I'm not really religious. Because another thing with religion is I personally always felt like it was just too many do's and too many don'ts. And I don't like all those rules and regulations, really. That goes back to the wild side of me, I guess. It's like, no, God didn't tell me that. God is more of my relationship. And if God and I agree on something, then I feel like it's okay.
Right.
Whereas like the church would tell me not to do something. And so I moved away from that pretty early. And so even today, when Dan and I attend church, I try to just go with an open mind and receive whatever message there may be for me.
Mm-hmm. It's a very light and liberating approach, right? Particularly coming from what I would perceive to be a more rigid church background, right? Having grown up around the Catholic Church, not that we were particularly devout, but I did go to Catholic high school. not because I was seeking that. It was just the better school option, in growing up. At least my perception it was. But that I felt the same thing, that the rigidity of here's the rules, here's the do's, here's the don'ts. If we're gonna write it on the chalkboard 100 times. I mean, it's like that didn't sit well with me, and yet still to this day, even though I don't really attend church or consider myself religious, I still identify as a Catholic. I was christened as a Catholic, and I'm confirmed as a Catholic. And if I were to go to church, I would go to Catholic church, even though I did go to a Baptist church for a number of years, maybe 10 years ago. But at the end of the day, I think your thought process and your approach is a very healthy one, of understanding that each of our different faiths, each individual is seeking something, right? Which is maybe some sort of comfort or understanding of that which we don't fully understand in terms of what happens before and after life and what that really means, right? Everybody's seeking that to some degree. We're all finding, to some degree, not all, but many people are seeking some sort of pathway there, and every religion seems to present their roadmap, right?
Well, and as I was growing up, I was kind of, I guess you would say I was rebellious. Maybe I was just a typical teenager, but I felt rebellious. But I would be like, but why are the Jews think they're special? Why do the Buddhists do this? Why do that's older religion than us. And then my biggest question in life was always, who was right? And it's like, you can't just say that anyone is right. And that's when I think I turned the corner for myself individually and was just like, you know what, this is right for you. Mm-hmm. This is going to be right for me, and I appreciate the people that find comfort with, holding tight to whatever belief system they have. Like, I can't argue with my parents. They're very comfortable with their faith. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't, because once I was exposed to the world and to people and other teachings, it just seemed too limited for me. Mm-hmm. Some people like that though. Like some people get a lot of comfort, right, with something that stays the same. They live their life in their little box or their comfort zone. My comfort zone is always expanding, mm-hmm. and breaking the norms and wanting to move above and beyond. Plus, I love to learn, right? So I'm constantly seeking. Some people aren't going to do that, but my seeking, that's where it led me.
It's interesting. I find that I'm constantly not seeking. I don't know that I'm seeking certain things, but I know that I'm always learning, right? Like, yes. Without a doubt. I mean, I'm always trying to learn more about something. I don't know that at this stage of my life I'm seeking something. Maybe in a year I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I'm seeking something. But I don't feel that way right now. But that being said, it's interesting. For the things that draw me back from time to time to the Catholic religion or church really is some of the sameness of the ritual experience, right? And it might even be just every few years I take a trip to New York City and I walk into St. Patrick's Cathedral, right? For me, just seeing that, the sameness mm-hmm. of that, grand experience, and lighting the candles and saying some prayers, which I do very rarely, right? But when I do find comfort in that, in the consistency that never changes, right? That's
true.
That's always there. But outside of that, I felt the same type of limitations as well. In high school, we had one theology teacher, and he was just one of these he wasn't a priest, but he was like, he was a wannabe priest, right?
Oh,
he just wanted to be a priest so bad. He was just so for it, and, he would say all this stuff, and we were smart asses, and we were like, well, what about this? And what about that? And his answer for everything was, you just need to dip into your bucket of faith. I was like, none of us bought that shit. It was like, come on, you what you're really telling us is that you don't know yourself, and you're afraid to reveal that maybe some of these things just aren't figured out, and these questions that we have are unanswered for a reason, right? There's some things that we will just never know.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Exactly.
You know, I think I asked my sister yesterday on the podcast, I asked her if she was afraid to die, and she said yes. And because she doesn't want to leave her kids behind, right? And everybody's like has some sort of fear of death, right? I'm not saying I want it, and I probably am afraid of it too. And if it really looked like it was real close to my face, I would probably be afraid as well too. But I also feel like there's just got to be this, like, I hope that there's this beautiful, magical, what you hear about, some way, somehow being reunited with whatever you want to call it, the heavens, God, spiritual bodies, however you want to title it, right? In my heart of hearts, I just feel like it's got to be great. Because when you think of all the literature and all these teachings over all the years, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, of somebody trying to share the message of the divinity of God or the afterlife, man, it just can't be fucking nothing.
No, it better be something. It better be something.
Right.
But I love how, like, now on TV, anytime you see that, it's portrayed as this incredible, like, open environment where you just see all this light, and you just feel like you want to walk into this warm cocoon of love.
Yeah.
Let's hope it is like that.
I hope it is too.
But you can also make heaven on earth, which is a whole different subject.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's an important goal too. Just in the sense that you don't have to wait till you get to heaven to have a good life, per se.
Yes.
I feel like God gave us a lot of things on this earth to enjoy, to enjoy our humanness while we can, but yeah, let's hope.
So I would like to segue into, let's call it maybe the last segment of our conversation.
Okay.
In light of that thought, as you, let's say, get closer to the end of your working and career life, and as you're looking forward to the years after that, and in the vein of creating heaven on earth, what is that next phase? I know we've talked about it lightly, but I'm curious, what is that next phase for you? Where do Tami and Dan go into the next chapter in order to ensure heaven on earth for you guys?
Well, our goal, of course, is that prior to retirement, I want to have basically all my debts paid off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's goal number one, of course. But that's the goal, that we don't really truly owe anything, and our goal is to travel as much as possible. My dream, of course, is that I wanted to go to Europe and live for like 3 to 6 months. While I'm there, I can go visit all the countries and have all my adventures at one time, as opposed to trying to take a trip every year and do this and that. Yeah. And so that's the biggest dream. That's our biggest dream. We have lots of places that we want to go. Being that we don't have children, that is our goal, is to travel. And I think ultimately, we're still in the process of trying to figure out some things. But I think we're going to be snowbirds, ultimately.
Yeah.
So that we can enjoy the best of both worlds, because, as wonderful as Florida is, it also gets really hot here during the summers, so that may be the time for us to snowbird. But mostly for us, it's going to be traveling.
What is it about? What's the what do you guys love most about travel? And then I guess the second one would be like, give me like 1, 2, or 3 places that you're really looking forward to visiting.
I think with traveling, number one, both my husband and I are avid readers. And over the course of years, I've read a lot of historical romances and novels, and just always pictured, the beauty of the older societies that you have in Europe that we don't have in America. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is just getting to experience, the places that I've read about, the different cultures, for sure, too, different foods, architecture, everything. Love it all. And then I just went blank on your second portion of your question.
Okay, so the second part of the question was just like, a couple, 1, 2, 3 places that you're really looking forward to visiting.
Well, the first bucket list place is supposed to be Prague, Budapest, and Vienna. And unfortunately, we had that booked for this year.
Right.
And it got canceled already. Another place that I really want to go to is I really would like to experience like Morocco in Northern Africa and just enjoy that area. And then ultimately, too, I want to go to Bora Bora.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, where is Bora Bora?
I don't even know. I just like the name of it.
Right.
No. But no, I've just always seen how, how they have like the nice little units that are right there on top of the water.
That's what I think of as well, too. Like like your own private, like thatched kind of tiki hut sitting over the beautiful blue water. Who wouldn't want to go there?
Of course.
I, too, have a desire to go to Morocco. I think it looks incredibly interesting. Really, that's probably a top 5 for me. I was fortunate enough to go to Prague, Budapest, and Vienna. That was the last trip my sister and I took with our granddad.
Oh, nice.
And it was a special trip. And Prague is everything that you hear about it. It's just like a freaking fairy tale when you walk into that place. You're just like, oh my God, it's like a medieval kingdom that's still alive and beautiful. And I agree with you. The traveling it's my favorite. It's my favorite thing to do. If none of this was here and resources were unlimited, I would, Air Vienna, we'd just travel.
Yeah.
I would just travel nonstop until I just couldn't do it anymore.
And then, as much as I do love to travel, I think there's always that small little element of coming home too.
Yes.
Which is always a lovely feeling.
Yeah.
But
well, cheers to all that, Tami.
Cheers.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
That you have brought to this company and continue to do. You're a light and beautiful and fun spirit and very welcome here.
Thank you.
And may all your future plans of creating heaven on earth come to fruition.
I have faith.
All right. There we go. Great job.